The street we lived on was the kind people described as peaceful without thinking twice about it. Tree-lined, wide sidewalks, neatly trimmed lawns, the kind of neighborhood where kids rode bikes until sunset and neighbors waved without really knowing each other's names. It wasn't perfect, but it was quiet, and that was all we wanted. My wife and I had moved there just under a year earlier. I worked long hours in logistics management. She worked dispatch, calm voice, steady hands, the kind of job that taught you how to listen when people were panicking. Our house was modest, 2 stories, beige siding, a narrow porch that creaked in one specific spot no matter how many times I tried to fix it. But it was ours. What I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that this neighborhood already had a reputation. Not for crime, not for noise, but for her. At the time, she was just a name I hadn't heard yet. Karen, the HOA president, and the woman who would eventually call 911 to force her way into my home, without realizing my wife would be the one to answer. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It started small. That's how these stories always start. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday. White envelope, HOA logo stamped in the corner like it was official government mail. I didn't even open it right away. It sat on the counter while I made coffee, while my wife packed her lunch, while the morning sun spilled across the kitchen floor like nothing bad could possibly happen in a house this normal. I opened it with one hand. Notice of violation. I laughed. Actually laughed. They claimed our trash bins were visible from the street outside approved hours. I looked out the window. The bins were behind the fence. Always had been. I figured it was a mistake. I tossed the letter into the junk drawer and forgot about it. That was mistake number 1. The second letter came a week later. This one was pink. Same logo, different tone. Second notice, failure to comply. Now I was confused. I reread it twice. Same violation, same bins, same imaginary problem. I took photos, time-stamped ones, sent them to the HOA email listed on the notice. No response. 3 days later, a third letter arrived. This one wasn't polite. This one mentioned fines. That was when I first heard her voice. I was mowing the lawn when I noticed someone standing at the edge of our driveway. Middle-aged woman, perfectly pressed blouse, oversized sunglasses, arms crossed like she was waiting to scold a child. I shut off the mower. She didn't smile. "Are you the homeowner?" she asked. Not hello, not good afternoon, just accusation. "Yes," I said cautiously. "I'm Karen, HOA president." There it was. She gestured toward the side of my house. "Your trash bins are visible from the street. That's a violation." I pointed, calmly, clearly. "They're behind the fence." She didn't even look. "They were visible yesterday." I frowned. "No, they weren't." Her lips tightened. "Are you calling me a liar?" The question hit harder than it should have. "I'm saying they've been in the same place for months." She stepped closer. Too close. "I've lived here 12 years. I know every rule, every house, every violation." Something in her tone made my stomach knot. This wasn't about trash bins. This was about control. "I sent photos," I said. "No one responded." "That's not my problem," she snapped. "You'll receive a fine." For something I didn't do? She leaned in, sunglasses inches from my face. "Comply or it escalates." Then she turned and walked away like she'd just won something. I stood there mower silent, heart pounding. I didn't know why, but I knew this wasn't over. That night, my wife listened quietly as I explained everything. She didn't interrupt, didn't react, just nodded. When I finished, she said something that stuck with me. "People who escalate small things usually do it because no one's ever stopped them." I shrugged it off. Another mistake. The fines started appearing on our account. $50, then $100, then administrative fees. Every time I contested them, the response was the same. Violation confirmed by HOA inspection. Inspection. I checked our security cameras. No one had been on our property. Except her. Once, standing just off the sidewalk, staring. The real trouble began the day she showed up unannounced. I was at work. My wife was home. Night shift had ended early. She heard the knocking first. Sharp, aggressive, not neighborly. She checked the doorbell camera. Karen. Clipboard in hand. My wife didn't open the door. She spoke through the intercom. "Can I help you?" "I'm here for an inspection," Karen said. "Open the door." My wife blinked. "You didn't schedule anything." "I don't need to." "That's not true." Karen's voice hardened. "You're refusing a lawful HOA inspection." My wife stayed calm. "You don't have the right to enter our home." There was a pause. Then Karen said something chilling. "If you don't open this door, I'll take further action." My wife recorded everything. Karen left. But not before muttering something the camera barely picked up. You people always think the rules don't apply to you. That night my wife showed me the footage. I felt anger coil in my chest. She can't do that, I said. She knows, my wife replied quietly. That's why she's doing it. I emailed the HOA board, attached the video, requested formal clarification of inspection authority. The response came the next morning. One sentence. HOA president is acting within her discretion. That's when disbelief turned into dread. Because if this was her discretion, what came next? I found out 2 days later. At 9:17 a.m., when my wife's phone rang, a number she recognized immediately. 911 dispatch, incoming call. She answered instinctively. 911, what's your emergency? And on the other end of the line was Karen. 911, what's your emergency? My wife's voice was calm, professional, muscle memory from years on the job. On the other end of the line, a sharp inhale. Then outrage. Yes, hello, this is Karen Wilson. I need officers dispatched immediately. I'm being obstructed from performing a lawful HOA inspection, and the homeowners are refusing entry. My wife froze, not outwardly, not in her voice. But I saw it later in the way she described the moment. How her stomach dropped, how disbelief washed over her so fast it almost felt physical. She muted the line. You're not going to believe this, she said quietly to me, eyes wide. It's her. I felt my heart slam against my ribs. Karen, calling 911, to force her way into our house. My wife unmuted the call. Ma'am, she said evenly, can you tell me your location? Yes, I'm at 1427 Brookside Lane, Karen snapped. The homeowners are refusing to comply with HOA regulations. I feel threatened. Threatened. I clenched my fists. My wife typed rapidly, documenting everything. And what exactly is the nature of the threat? She asked. They're being hostile, Karen replied. They're hiding violations and refusing inspection. I believe there may be unsafe conditions inside the home. Unsafe conditions. That was the moment my wife knew exactly what Karen was doing. Escalating, weaponizing the system, using buzzwords she thought would force a police response. My wife leaned back slightly, voice steady but firmer now. Ma'am, are you reporting a crime in progress? There was a pause. Karen hadn't expected that question. Yes, she said finally. Obstruction, trespass, possibly endangerment. My wife's jaw tightened. Ma'am, HOA disputes are civil matters. They do not constitute emergencies. Karen's tone exploded. Excuse me? I am the HOA president. These people are refusing lawful authority. I demand officers be sent immediately. Demand. That word echoed. My wife looked straight at me. I'm dispatching officers, she whispered, but I'm flagging this. Then back into the phone. Officers are being dispatched to your location. Please remain calm and do not attempt to force entry. Karen scoffed. I won't have to. Once the police arrive, they'll make them comply. The call ended. My wife slowly lowered the phone. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then she said quietly, she has no idea. The patrol car arrived 12 minutes later. We watched from the living room window as Karen practically sprinted toward it, clipboard tucked under her arm like evidence in a courtroom drama. She was talking before the officer even shut the door, pointing, gesturing, dramatic. The officer glanced toward our house, then back at her, then toward his radio. I opened the door before anyone knocked. Not aggressively, not defensively, just calmly. The officer approached first. Sir, he said, neutral tone. We received a call about a dispute. Yes, I replied. We did too. Karen cut in immediately. They are refusing an HOA inspection, she said loudly. They're hiding violations and being uncooperative. I believe the interior may be unsafe. The officer raised an eyebrow. Ma'am, he said slowly, do you have a warrant? Karen scoffed. I don't need one. HOA bylaws grant inspection authority. The officer looked at her, then at me. Sir, do you consent to an inspection? No, I said plainly. Karen gasped. You can't just refuse? Yes, the officer said. He can. Karen's face flushed red. This is outrageous, she snapped. You're enabling non-compliance. The officer's tone hardened. Ma'am, this is a civil matter. You called 911. That's for emergencies. I felt threatened, Karen insisted. The officer glanced at me. Did you threaten her? No. My wife stepped into view behind me. The officer nodded politely. And you, ma'am? No, she said calmly. We spoke through the doorbell camera. Karen spun toward her. You were hostile. My wife didn't flinch. I told you that you didn't have permission to enter our home. The officer sighed. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, "you cannot force entry without a warrant. HOA rules do not override constitutional rights." Karen laughed. An actual laugh. "That's not what my attorney says." The officer straightened. "Well, I'm telling you," Karen's voice rose. "So you're just going to let them violate HOA rules?" "I'm going to advise you to resolve this through proper civil channels," the officer replied, "and not through emergency services." Karen's eyes narrowed. "So no arrest?" The officer blinked. "Arrest? No, there's no crime." Karen's expression shifted. Anger, then calculation, then something colder. "This isn't over," she said, pointing at me. "You'll regret this." The officer stepped between us. "Ma'am," he warned, "that sounds like a threat." Karen scoffed again, turned on her heel and stormed away. The officer lingered. "I recommend you document everything," he said quietly. "And if she returns, call us." We thanked him. He left. The street returned to quiet, but the silence felt different now. Heavy. Charged. 2 days later, the fines doubled, then tripled. Then a notice appeared on our door. "Final warning. Forced compliance pending. No explanation. No authority cited. Just intimidation." My wife stared at the paper. "She's escalating because she lost," she said. And then Karen made her worst mistake. She came back, this time with a locksmith. The sound of metal against metal is unmistakable when you're not expecting it. A sharp scrape, then a dull tap, then the slow, deliberate click of someone testing a lock that isn't theirs. I was upstairs when I heard it. At first I thought it was a delivery. Then I heard a man's voice outside, low, uncertain. Ma'am, are you sure about this?" Karen's voice followed immediately. "Yes, I'm authorizing it. This property is in violation." My blood went cold. I rushed to the window. There she was, standing on our porch, clipboard tucked under her arm, and beside her, a locksmith, tools in hand, hesitant posture, clearly uncomfortable. I shouted down the stairs, "She's back." My wife was already moving. She didn't panic, didn't shout. She grabbed her phone and pulled up the doorbell camera feed. Karen knocked once, hard. Then, without waiting, turned to the locksmith. "Proceed." That was it. That was the moment disbelief snapped into rage. I opened the door before the locksmith could touch the lock. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I demanded. The locksmith jumped. Karen didn't. She smiled. "Good," she said. "You're home." "You brought a locksmith to my house," I said slowly. "Get off my property." She lifted her clipboard like a badge. "Under HOA authority, I'm enforcing compliance." "You have no authority," my wife said, stepping beside me. Her voice was ice cold. "Leave, now." Karen's smile vanished. "You people think you're above the rules." I laughed. A short, sharp laugh fueled entirely by disbelief. "You tried this already," I said. "The police told you—" She cut me off. "I'm done playing nice." Then she turned to the locksmith again. "Do it." The locksmith shook his head. "I'm sorry," he said. "I need written proof of ownership or a court order." Karen's face twisted. "I am the HOA president." "That doesn't make you the homeowner," he replied, backing away. Karen snapped. "Fine." She reached into her purse, pulled out her phone, and dialed. I recognized the number immediately. My wife did too. She put it on speaker. "I need officers immediately," Karen said loudly. "The homeowners are now threatening me and interfering with a lawful enforcement action." My wife stared at the phone, then at Karen, then back at the phone, and slowly, she smiled. Karen had no idea. My wife gently took the phone from her own pocket and raised it. On her screen, active dispatch, same call. Karen froze. "What are you doing?" she snapped. My wife spoke clearly. "Ma'am, you are currently speaking to me." Karen frowned. "I'm on the phone with 911. "Yes," my wife said calmly. "You are." Silence. The locksmith's eyes widened. Karen laughed nervously. "That's not funny." My wife's voice shifted, still calm, but now unmistakably authoritative. "Ma'am, this is Dispatcher WA with County Emergency Services. I took your call earlier today, and I'm taking it again now." Karen's face drained of color. You're lying." "I'm recording this call," my wife continued. "You are attempting to gain unlawful entry into a private residence. You have been told previously by responding officers that this is a civil matter." Karen's voice rose. "You're abusing your position." "No," my wife replied. "You are abusing emergency services." The locksmith stepped back fully now. "I'm leaving," he muttered. "I want no part of this." Karen spun on him. "You can't leave." He didn't respond. He walked away. Karen turned back toward us. Her voice shook with fury. "You planned this." My wife didn't blink. "No, you did." Karen jabbed a finger toward me. "He's threatening me." My wife glanced at me. "Sir, have you threatened this individual?" "No," I said flatly. "Are you attempting to force entry into her home?" my wife asked Karen. Karen hesitated, then snapped. "I'm enforcing rules." "Answer the question," my wife said. Karen screamed. "Yes, because it's my right." That was it. That was the sentence. My wife looked directly at the phone. "Units are en route," she said calmly. "Please remain where you are." Karen's eyes widened. "They're coming for him, right?" My wife tilted her head. "No," she said. "They're coming for you." Karen stepped back. "You can't do this." "You called 911, my wife replied. "Twice. For a non-emergency, and you attempted unlawful entry." Karen shook her head rapidly. "This is harassment." My wife's tone hardened. "Ma'am, stop speaking." Karen didn't. She paced. She ranted. She dug herself deeper with every word. When the sirens grew louder, panic finally broke through her rage. She tried to leave. That was when the patrol cars pulled up. 3 of them, lights flashing, doors opening. The lead officer stepped out and recognized her instantly. "You again," he said. Karen froze. "I can explain." He looked at us, then at the door, then at the locksmith tools abandoned on the porch, then at his radio. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "turn around." Karen laughed hysterically. "You're arresting the wrong person." The officer didn't smile. "Hands behind your back," she screamed. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. As the cuffs clicked shut, she shouted the same thing over and over. "I was just doing my job." The officer read her the charges. Misuse of emergency services, attempted unlawful entry, false reporting. Karen's knees buckled. My wife watched silently, phone still in hand, call still recording. The sound of the patrol car door slamming shut echoed down the street. Hard, final. Every neighbor within eyesight had come outside by now. Curtains twitched. Phones were raised. Whispers rippled like a wave. Karen, HOA President Karen, sat in the back of the cruiser, red-faced, mascara streaked, still yelling through the glass like someone who couldn't accept that reality had finally caught up to her. "This is a misunderstanding," she screamed. "I know my rights." The officer ignored her. He walked back toward us, posture calm but unmistakably done. "Sir," he said to me, "we're going to need statements." "Of course," I replied. He turned to my wife. "And you, ma'am, dispatch confirmed the recordings." My wife nodded and handed him her phone. "Everything's documented," she said, "including the previous call and the warning given by your department." The officer exhaled slowly as he scrolled. "She was warned," he muttered, "and she still did this." Another officer approached. "You won't believe this," he said quietly. "She told us she authorized a forced entry." The first officer shook his head. "That's not how any of this works." Karen banged on the window. "You're letting criminals get away with violations," she shouted. "This whole neighborhood will collapse." One of the neighbors, an older man who lived across the street, finally spoke up. "She's been harassing people for years," he said loudly. "About time someone stopped her." A woman next to him nodded. "She fined us for having the wrong shade of blue on our door." Another voice joined in. "She tried to tow my car from my own driveway." The murmurs grew louder. Anger that had been simmering quietly for years was finally boiling over. Karen heard it. And for the first time, real fear crossed her face. The officer closed the cruiser door completely and turned the key. "She'll be booked downtown," he said. "You may be contacted by the DA." I felt something loosen in my chest. Relief. But it was short-lived, because the consequences weren't over. Not even close. By the next morning, the story was everywhere. A neighbor had posted the video. The locksmith, the confrontation, the arrest, blurry at first, then reposted, then cleaned up, then shared again. The caption read, "HOA president calls 911 to break into home, gets arrested instead." It exploded. Local Facebook groups, neighborhood forums, then a local news page picked it up. By noon, a reporter was standing across the street with a cameraman. Karen's name was no longer whispered. It was public, and people were furious. The HOA emergency meeting was called that same night. Not by Karen. She couldn't. She was still in custody when the email went out. The board met without her. We attended. So did nearly every homeowner on the street. The room buzzed with tension. When the acting chair called the meeting to order, the first agenda item was simple. Removal of HOA president. No speeches, no defenses, just facts. Recorded calls, police reports, video evidence. When the vote was taken, it wasn't even close. Unanimous. Karen was officially removed from her position. But that wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of her consequences. 2 weeks later, we received notice from the court. Karen had been formally charged. Misuse of emergency services. Attempted unlawful entry. False reporting. The prosecutor didn't mince words. She abused a position of authority, he said, and endangered public resources. Her attorney tried to argue misunderstanding, tried to argue stress, tried to argue entitlement. None of it worked. The recordings destroyed her defense. Especially one line, "Yes, because it's my right." The judge didn't even look amused. She was sentenced to probation, mandatory community service, a fine, and a permanent no-contact order with us. But the real punishment wasn't legal. It was social. Karen's house went up for sale less than 3 months later. The for sale sign stood crooked in her front yard, like it was ashamed to be there. No one waved when the moving truck came. No one helped. No one said goodbye. The woman who once ruled the neighborhood now left it in silence. And just like that, the street was quiet again. Or so we thought. Because one final twist remained. Something Karen never anticipated. Something that made everything she did pointless. A week after Karen's house went on the market, an official letter arrived in our mailbox. Not from the HOA, not from the court, but from the city. I opened it at the kitchen counter, expecting some leftover administrative nonsense tied to the case. Instead, my eyebrows lifted. Then my mouth fell open. My wife read it over my shoulder. Then she let out a slow, disbelieving laugh. "You've got to be kidding me," she said. The letter explained that, due to multiple complaints and verified misconduct tied to HOA enforcement practices, the city had initiated a formal audit of the Homeowners Association. Not just Karen, the entire HOA. Turns out, when someone abuses authority loudly enough, it attracts attention from places they can't intimidate. The audit uncovered everything. Improper fines, unlawful inspections, selective enforcement, threat-based compliance, records that didn't match deposits, fines that were never voted on, and one detail that made everyone go silent when it was announced. Karen had been issuing violations without board approval for years. She wasn't enforcing rules. She was inventing them. The HOA was placed under temporary city oversight. The board was dissolved. New elections were scheduled. And every fine issued under Karen's presidency? Voided, refunded, erased. We received a check. So did dozens of our neighbors. People who'd been bullied quietly. People who'd paid just to avoid conflict. People who finally felt vindicated. The power she clung to didn't just disappear. It reversed. One evening as I watered the lawn, the older man from across the street walked over. "Never thought I'd see the day," he said, nodding toward Karen's empty house. "Me neither," I replied. "She used to walk this block like she owned it." I nodded. "Now look at it," he said. "Peaceful again. Kids rode bikes. Dogs barked lazily. Someone laughed down the street. Normal sounds. The kind you don't appreciate until they're threatened." A month later, my wife received a commendation. Not public, not flashy. Just a letter, thanking her for professionalism under pressure. For handling a call that could have gone very differently. For protecting both the public and the system from abuse. She folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. She didn't brag. She didn't need to. As for Karen, we heard one last thing. Through a neighbor, she'd tried to run for HOA president in her new neighborhood. Someone Googled her name. The video came up. The arrest. The headline. The comments. She withdrew her name the same day. Because once the truth is public, there's no clipboard big enough to hide behind. I still think about that first letter sometimes. The trash bin violation. The lie that started everything. How someone so obsessed with control couldn't handle being told no. How power, when unchecked, turns small people loud. And how the system only works when the right person answers the call. Because the day Karen dialed 911 to force her way into my home, she thought she was calling for backup. She thought the badge was hers. She thought the rules bent for her. She didn't know my wife would be on the other end of the line. And by the time she realized it, the cuffs were already closing.